Okay, so um, welcome once again. A special welcome to someone you just saw a while ago who came from Rome. He's not the Pope. He's Father Lucio, no, from Verbal Bay, also from Mexico. But he was here in the Philippines for quite a number of years also, no, before he went to Rome as our secretary of the male branch, no, the Verbal Bay male branch. So he continues as the secretary, but he's on his way to Vietnam. But anyway, at the end of the school, maybe we can allow him to say some words also, no, to explain what he's doing here. So welcome, Lucia, and welcome to all of us once again. So just a little recap of the School of the Word. Sorry. Okay. Just a little technical um, thing for a while. Just 3 seconds. Okay, great, great, no problem. So, okay, yeah. So sometimes our spiritual life is like that, no? It's connected by a wire, but you can't see it, but it's there. Don't worry. Okay, it's there. So, yeah. Just a little recap. Last week, we were listening to the guidelines about the call of the first disciples in the Gospel of Matthew, right? Jesus calls all of us to be disciples. And somehow the church is trying to remind us what is the basic identity of being Christian. No, it's not just about going to church. It's not just about saying our prayers. It's about knowing we are followers of Jesus. He calls us to be like him, to live like him, and to learn, gradually from him. So this week we continue with those that learning of how to be like Jesus gradually in our lives and for the whole of our lives. Because well, I don't know who of us can say we are already like Jesus. So we have our whole lifetime to learn, and that's what the church is trying to invite us to. So this week we are going to look at something specific about being disciples, about being God's people. And the key word here that I would say is what in Hebrew the Bible says calls anawim, to be the anawim of God. There's a little book that explains the readings called the anawim, right? What does the anawim mean? And basically how it is a call to a humble kind of holiness. We all know that we are all called to be holy. And sometimes the more holy we become, the more humble also we need to remember to be. So humility, like Saint Teresa of Avila says, humility is like the queen who wins the heart of the king of heaven. So who's the king of heaven? Jesus Christ, of course. But who's the queen that wins his heart every time she prays? Her name is humility. Some can say, Mary really embodies humility. And so humility is like the secret ingredient of our prayer life. It's the secret ingredient of being a Christian, like the foundations, of being holy. So we're going to see how this humility has to do a lot with holiness. And the Anawim are our example. So let's look at the first reading. The first reading, actually, the word Anawim actually comes from this passage. I'll show you where later on. The word of God says in the prophet Zephaniah, "Seek the Lord, all you humble of the earth. Seek justice, seek humility. Perhaps you may be sheltered on the day of the Lord's anger." So you can see how many times the word humble appears. And then it continues to say, "I will leave as a remnant in your midst, a people humble and lowly, who shall take refuge in the name of the Lord." Seek the Lord, you humble of the earth. It's interesting here where we seek not only justice, but we seek humility. And a certain question that we can ask ourselves, do I seek to be humble every day? I think we're in a society that doesn't really look up to people who are humble. Well, because they're humble. It's like, no, you have to seek to be the best you have to be. Well, that's true also. You have to assert yourself. You have to tell the world who you are. No, that's the way our world is. And there's a lot of value in that. And it has something to do with humility as well. But that's very special that we are supposed to seek humility as well. So it's not only to do your best, it's not only to be the best that you are or can be, it's to be humble meanwhile. To be humble meanwhile you do that. To be a good Christian, to do good works, to show charity, but do it humbly. So there's a specific call in the readings of today to seek the virtue of humility. There's a phrase here, no? I will leave as a remnant in your midst, a people humble and lowly. This is the Anawim, a people humble and lowly. So, as God's people, as followers of Christ, we are asked to be these that people can see. These are the people who are humble. Not only are they good people, but they do it so humbly. Okay, so Anawim, let's look at the word Anawim again. Who are the Anawim today, no, in today's world? Basically, the message of today is they are those who lovingly depend on God. The Anawim are people who are humble in the way that they depend on God. They know that they cannot depend on themselves alone, not even on others, however good they are, but we need to depend on God. But they depend on Him in a loving way, not in a forced way. Sometimes we can depend on others in a forced way. I have no choice, like a little child or teenager who's growing up. I don't like what mom is saying. I don't like what dad is saying, but I depend on you. So I have no choice. But of course, a teenager can do that lovingly as well. I know they love me, and therefore I depend on them. So Anawim is a Hebrew word from the Old Testament which describes the poor ones, literally, the poor and the lowly ones, who remain faithful to God in times of difficulty. And that's very important. They were not only poor and lowly, they remained faithful. Remember the first reading? They didn't steal, they didn't lie, they were honest. They tried to follow God's commandments in the midst of their poverty and their difficulty. So these humble people became known as the Anawim, or that faithful remnant that was mentioned in the first reading. Remnants, like a small group. So it started off as many, and suddenly there are these few left who are faithful. So sometimes we experience that also in our Christian prayer groups and communities. A faithful remnant who were humble and who chose to continue being faithful to what God told them. So they were those who took refuge in God instead of in anything else or in anyone else, not even in themselves. Okay, that sounds a bit radical. Of course, we depend on others, but their radical, basic dependence is on God. That's their stability in life. That's their security in the midst of their poverty. I have God. I belong to God. So, as I said, in summary, it is a call to that loving dependence on God in the way that we live. According to this reading, that is humility, depending on God. It's not just to shy away from our talents. We know all this, no? The humility is not just to put ourselves down and say we are nothing, we're nobody. No. Humility, according to scriptures, is that radical dependence on God. Because I belong to Him and I know that He loves me. So if we take a look at the second reading, it goes in the same line. No? The church is very wise to arrange all the readings according to the theme that is trying to promote in the church. So the second reading, the letter to the Corinthians of St. Paul says, consider your own calling, brothers and sisters. Again, about humility. Not many of you were wise by human standards. That's not why Jesus called you, no, in other words. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. Rather, God chose the foolish of the world to shame the wise. And God chose the weak of the world to shame the strong. And God chose the lowly and despised of the world, those who count for nothing, to reduce to nothing those who are something, so that no human being might boast before God. So this sounds a bit sadistic of God, no? Why is God doing this? Why is he trying to shame the wise, no? And shame the strong, and to reduce to nothing those who feel they count for something? And perhaps it's just a reminder that we are all the same. We have all the same dignity, no matter who we are. And God, in his wisdom, wants to bring back that balance. No, when we start to forget that we are all the same, that we are all equal in front of God, God brings that balance somehow through humility. And this reading is beautiful. It says, remember first when you came close to God, was it because you were powerful, because you were great, because you felt wise, or precisely because you needed wisdom? You felt helpless, and you felt like you were nobody, that first you came to God. Like a reminder, no? When we come before God, remember who we are and why we first came. Um, so Christianity with humility. Now let us go a bit into this holiness and humility. No, this morning in our prayer, and just some words from Pope Francis in this document about holiness. No, he was trying to promote about life of holiness amongst Christians, and it's called "Rejoice and Be Glad." No, we can ask Latin from Father Lucio, who just came from Rome. Gaudete et exultate, which means rejoice and be glad. And that's the last line of the Beatitudes, actually. So what he says here is, a Christian cannot think of his or her mission on earth without seeing it as a path of holiness. So we know as Christians, remember we said we are called to follow Jesus as missionary disciples. But if we have a mission, Pope Francis reminds us, we have to accompany it with a life of holiness. Because what attracts people to the church is not our words, they are not our techniques. What is attractive about the church should be holiness, holy lives. So this path of holiness, again, is coming back to, it has a lot to do with humility, humility. And Jesus teaches us a very simple way to understand how to practice Christian humility. Okay, I emphasize the word Christian. Humility according to Jesus Christ. And they are what we call the Beatitudes. This is supposed to be the place of the sermon, where the Sermon on the Mount took place, in Holy Land. The it's just an how do you say, a promotion for those who want to start pilgrimages again, or who are going to pilgrimages. The Holy Land. No, this is where that chapel or that church there is supposed to be built, where Jesus gave his sermon. And you can imagine the number of people who were gathered there listening to Jesus. What was so powerful about the message of the Beatitudes that it became the central teaching of Jesus Christ? Humility and holiness through the Beatitudes. Now, I'm sure you're all very familiar with the Beatitudes, but today I invite you to listen to it as if it was the first time. Do you remember the first time you read the Beatitudes? Yeah, it's hard. No, it's hard to ask people who are Catholic since they were born, because I'm sure you've heard it so many times. I tell you, I remember the first time I read the Beatitudes because I'm a late Christian. I was baptized at 21. I had my first Bible, and this is my first Bible. It's a gift from my sister who wanted to convert me. So she got a very nice leather-bound Bible to attract me to read it. And there was a time when I was already baptized, so I was in my early 20s, and I used the guide. Have you heard of the 365 Days with the Lord? There's this Bible reading guide, right, of the daily scriptures, and there are some reflections, and then there are questions. Beautiful, beautiful. Simple thing that I was doing just to learn how to be Christian. And one day, it was a guide to read the Beatitudes. I'm not exaggerating. The first time I read them, I cried. The first time I read the Beatitudes, I burst into tears because it was really out of this world for me. It was really out of this world for me. The wisdom of Jesus, the freedom, I just felt something inside of me, a burden that was taken away. I felt as if Jesus was teaching me, you know what? This is life. You've been missing out. You have been so worried about so many things in life, but I tell you, this is it. And I could imagine all the people listening to him and being touched by those words because this man, Jesus, lived them. He was a witness of what it means to live the Beatitudes, to be happy. Happy are the poor. When I first read that, I thought, what are you saying? Happy are the poor in spirit, for theirs in the kingdom is the kingdom of heaven. It's something that questions the mind, but the heart agrees with. It's very interesting. The mind cannot accept it, but the heart says, I want that. Tell me how, Lord. And so today I invite you, as we go through the Beatitudes, one by one, I invite you to do it in the form of conversation with Jesus. Imagine you're there listening to him as he teaches, and he's looking at you, and he sees your face like, huh? And he loves you, he's loving you so much, looking at you, and he wants to explain them to you. So the Beatitudes, humility and holiness, the power and the freedom of humility. Pope Francis was saying in the same document, Jesus explained with great simplicity what it means to be holy when he gave us the Beatitudes. So if you want to be holy in a humble way, simple, live the Beatitudes. Lord, I can't remember all of them. I haven't been thinking about them for some time. Great, that's why the church tries to remind us every year. Warning, before we go through warning, okay, going through the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes go against the flow. So I'm going to read the warning of Pope Francis. In the same document, he said, although Jesus' words may strike us as poetic, beautiful, and you may even cry like me, when I read them, they clearly run counter to the way things are usually done in our world. Even if we find Jesus' message attractive, the world, pushes us towards another way of living. So the Beatitudes are in no way trite or undemanding. So it's nothing superficial. It's not just something that Jesus said in passing. They are very demanding. So it's quite the opposite. We can only practice them if the Holy Spirit fills us with his power and frees us from our weakness, our selfishness, our complacency, and our pride. So the Beatitudes goes to the root of our challenge to be Christians. It goes to the innermost challenge which is in our hearts. To be Christian is not about the external things only. As I said, to be humble has a lot to do with our interior life. And Jesus goes to the root through the Beatitudes. But he promises happiness. If you practice them, you will be happy. True happiness of the gospel. So let us ask, as Pope Francis says, the grace of the Holy Spirit as we go through them to really look at them and what is trying to say, what they are trying to say in our lives as Christians, especially as we begin this year. No? What does the Spirit want us to practice through the Beatitudes this year? Okay. So first question, how many Beatitudes did Jesus teach us? Dun-dun-dun-dun. 9, 8, 8 or 9? 9. Okay, some say 8, some say 9, but they are both good answers because literally Jesus said 9 times blessed. But you know, in Chinese, I don't know why we call it 8. Maybe because the last two are connected. They're about persecution. So both are correct. All right. Thank you. So at least we are aware. We have 8 or 9 challenges to practice regarding humility as Christians. And it might be worth to really meditate on them often and to remember them. So here are the Beatitudes, the first 8. Actually, this is the summary of the Anawim way. The Anawim way of discipleship. How wonderful if we can really, I think this is the invitation of today, how wonderful that we can practice this throughout the year. If we forget everything else, that this will always be that foundation and the stable rock of discipleship that we can go back to. Okay? So once again, let us hear these words. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure of heart, for they will see God. Wow. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are they who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. To top it off. Blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of evil against you falsely because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven. So these are the words that Jesus used in the Sermon on the Mount that captivated 5,000 people. Just imagine all of them in silence, listening, pondering, and he addresses them to us again today. You know, there was a song that we had in the beginning that is taken from the Litany of Humility. It's very beautifully sung by, I forgot her name, Daniel Rose, I think. And it summarizes the Beatitudes. If you like to listen to it more often, because I don't know, it just moves me to tears listening to that. The wisdom of Jesus in humility through the Beatitudes. So today, I invite you to pray this main point. Which of the, I'm going to go through them one by one, okay, but very briefly. And I invite you to ask yourself this question. Which of the Beatitudes do you feel called to live at this time of your life? Okay, as you listen to them, very brief, simple explanations, but I think the Beatitudes themselves speak to you. The word of Jesus themselves speak to you. So it's just brief explanation, and you can try to identify and choose for yourself, your life, especially this year, what would you be called to live? All right? So if you want to just take photographs, because I'll just go through very quickly, and then later on your time of prayer, you can just pray about them, all right? So let's go to the first. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. If you notice, most of the Beatitudes have a promise in the future tense. This is one of the two that speaks of the promise in present tense. It's meaning, if you live this, you're in heaven now, not later. Now, you want to live in heaven now? You want to have and to possess heaven now. Live this one. This is one of the key ones. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Let's take a look at Pope Francis's um, explanation, again from Rejoice and Be Glad. What does this beatitude basically mean? Holy indifference to created things. Holy indifference, okay? Not the normal kind of indifference like I don't care, no? But being detached. It means being detached from things that are created in order to live for God, in order to live for what really matters in human terms. No, we need to be detached from created things. Pope Francis says the gospel invites us to peer into the depths of our hearts to see where we find our security in life. What gives you security? Who gives you security? Whose presence? Perhaps, no? What things? When you look at, so for example, as even missionaries, we have to evaluate this, no? When I check our bank accounts, and I see, oh, there's some minimum here, okay, I feel secure. When it goes to a certain level that is below, I feel a bit insecure, and I don't know if we can continue our projects now. Where do we find our security in practical terms? And it's between you and God. No, just try to examine what makes me feel secure. It may not be something, it may be someone, it may be a routine that I have that makes me secure. And God is saying, am I your security? It says here, no, wealth ensures nothing, Pope Francis continues. Indeed, once we think we are rich, when we feel secure in ourselves, we can become so self-satisfied that we leave no room for God's word. That is a sign that we are having other securities other than God, and we have no more space for Him. For the love, and no more space for the love of our brothers and sisters, no more time for others, or for the enjoyment of the most important things in life, not things that really matter. I have no time for them. Jesus calls blessed those who are poor in spirit, those who have a poor heart, for there the Lord can enter with his perennial newness. You know, very simply, when Jesus says, give us today our daily bread, to learn to live day by day depending on God. That is a pure heart. You know what, Lord, I need many things today, but the first thing in the morning, I know that I need you. That is a poor heart. I need you, Lord, to tell me what you want, to tell me what is your will today, to tell me how you want me to do it, and what you are providing for me to do this. So somebody who is already self-satisfied, of course, has no time for that. No, he tells or she tells God what he wants to do, not what God wants him to do. So somehow this is like an entry point, but the rest are all interconnected, okay? So don't worry if this doesn't sound explaining everything about the first beatitude. No, but basically here, it's a question Pope Francis invites us to see, where do I place my security? When do I feel self-satisfied and I don't need God anymore? Okay? The second, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are the meek. Meek, other synonyms could be humble. Another synonym could be gentle. Blessed are the gentle. They will inherit the earth. Blessed are the humble. They will inherit the earth. Wow, this is a very big promise, from Jesus. To win the whole world. How? To win everyone. How? Be humble. Be humble. How did Jesus conquer the hearts of so many people throughout history is humility. That is something so beautiful to ponder about. How did Jesus win the hearts of so many saints, so many Christians, so many people who believe in him? Not through his power, but through his humility. And that's something we can emulate or learn from. Again, back to Pope Francis's explanation, reacting, learning how to react with meekness and humility to situations, no? As you can see, to react. This is about reactions. Christ says, learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. And the key word here is rest. Rest from anxieties, rest from disappointments, rest from frustrations. Pope Francis says, if we are constantly upset and impatient with others, we will end up drained and weary, tired. Try to think of it. When was the last time you were tired with life? Yesterday. When was the last time you felt burdened? This morning. Sometimes I'm talking about myself. Okay, so it makes us tired when we don't live with meekness or humility. But if we regard the faults and limitations of others with tenderness and meekness, without an air of superiority, which is mainly the problem, no? Because we feel we are better than them. We're doing better, we are more talented, we are more responsible. Normally, that's the cause, no? We can actually help them and stop wasting our energy on useless complaining. So sounds so simple, right? It's very difficult to do in the daily practice. To really consider that others are not less than us, are not doing less, are not less capable is so difficult. Why? Because we're trying our best to give the best. But to realize that whatever I'm doing comes from God's grace, and whatever bad they're doing, I'm not doing because of God's grace, then it makes it possible to see that, I'm just like the other person, but God has shown me favor. And so what I need to do is to help the other person to have the same grace. So this is very simple, but very challenging to do in the daily practice. And that's why we need prayer, to pray throughout the day, to ask for that grace. Because at the end of the day, is to learn from the Lord how to be happy with others as well, and to help them in a practical way. All right, so I will move on because we have 8 to go. What time is it already? Okay, quarter. So quickly. Blessed are those who mourn. So remember, you're supposed to choose your own, okay, the time of prayer. This one is quite easy to understand. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And the invitation of Pope Francis is to learn how to mourn with others. So mourning not just for myself here, okay? What it means is to mourn with others. I'll just read this. It's quite self-explanatory. A person who sees things as they truly are and sympathizes with pain and sorrow is capable of touching life's depths and finding authentic happiness. Wow, if I learn how to allow myself to be touched by the suffering, the pain and sorrow of others, I will discover what life is about. Somebody who learns how to suffer. That's holiness. He or she is consoled not by the world, the comforts of the world, but by Jesus himself. Such persons are unafraid to share in the suffering of others. They do not flee from painful situations. Sometimes we need to flee, no? to restore ourselves in prayer. But they discover the meaning of life by coming to the aid of those who suffer, understanding their anguish and bringing relief. So not only do they suffer with, they find in a very practical way that they can respond. Sometimes, don't you feel sometimes overwhelmed with the suffering of others? That is not the Christian way. What Jesus is saying is feel the suffering in a way that you can help them practically. That's it. That's it. Don't be overwhelmed. It's not about you. It's about the consolation that Jesus wants to give through you, through prayer. They sense that the other is flesh of our flesh and are not afraid to draw near, even to touch their wounds. They feel compassion for others in such a way that all distance vanishes. You know, in my own experience of working, helping the poor, what makes it burdensome is when there is no relationship with them. You know, you feel obliged, you feel like you owe them something, you want to do something, but you cannot, and they're still living worse conditions than you are, and every time you see them, you feel bad, right? I don't know if that happens to you. But for me, what solves that problem, to continue helping them, is to have a relationship with them. And you just feel your brothers and sisters. And just like any other brother and sister, you do what you can to help. But because the most important thing is your relationship with them. And they feel that too. They know it. They know it. They know you can't do everything for them. But what they value is that you have a relationship with them. So I think this is what Pope Francis is saying. Don't be afraid to mourn with them. Don't be afraid to come close, because what they need is someone to be with them. Number 4. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Some people say, no, this is for those who always feel angry. Angry with injustices going around. And anger can also move us to action. But Pope Francis says, true justice comes about in people's lives when they themselves are just in their decisions. It is expressed in their pursuit of justice for the poor and for the weak. So not only people who are poor, but those others who are vulnerable, the sick, the lonely, the abandoned. You know? So being just brings peace to our own hearts. You know, I think all of us experience it. When we do just actions, it brings peace. Okay, the world is still has many problems, but I feel the peace because I'm doing my part. So it's not about complaining, looking at how bad the world is. No, no. My world. Am I making just decisions and actions? And I'm bringing that justice gradually and peace in my heart, myself, and to others. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. I think this is the favorite of Pope Francis. He didn't say it, but I think so. Okay. Very simply, seeing things and acting on them with mercy. Like the key or the focus of the Beatitudes, mercy. Mercy has two aspects. It involves giving, helping, and serving others, but it also includes forgiving, forgiveness, and understanding. Is this what I need to practice this year? Giving, helping, serving, but at the same time, forgiving and understanding those precisely I help and serve. You know, there's somebody who said before, God told us to love the others not because they are lovable. God asks us to love others not because they are lovable, as we sometimes are not. God asks us to love them because He loves them, and that's very different. The motivation, you know, is because He loves them. It doesn't matter whether we deserve it or not, whether we're lovable or not. It's because He loves them, and that's why we should love. So giving is connected to forgiving, because many times we don't get the reaction we want. We are disappointed by the results. Just forgive. You notice the word forgive, forgive. If you want to keep giving, you have to forgiving. So it's all both connected, no? Giving and forgiving. Giving and forgiving means reproducing in our lives some small measure of God's perfection, because He loves, remember, which gives and forgives super abundantly. So we need the grace of God again. Oh Lord, Help me to forgive. I don't feel like it, but just give me the grace to do it. Or something like that. Okay, we're coming to the end. Well, a few more. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Wow, maybe this is the one for me or for you. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God in everything and in everyone. This life is beautiful. This person, these people are wonderful because I see God there. And this means keeping a heart free of all that tarnishes love, free of everything. Everything meaning our thoughts. Many times our thoughts are what makes our love not so perfect. Sometimes our feelings that we cannot help. Sometimes is what we accept in the words we hear, not the words we listen to, or the things we see. So we need to take care of that also. A heart capable of love admits nothing that might harm, weaken, or endanger that love, even for our families. There are things we know that endanger our love for our families, for one another. And we have to decide not to say no. No, our problem many times in a world that is so compliant, so nice, is when we don't know even to say no to bad things. And this is saying you have to say no to things that are bad also. Don't be nice to the devil. Don't try to convert the devil. Run away from him. Nothing stained by falsehood has any real worth in the Lord's eyes. He flees from deceit and rises and departs from foolish thoughts. So don't entertain them. Run away. Run away from anything that will tarnish your love. Certainly, there can be no love without works of love. But this beatitude reminds us that the Lord expects a commitment to our brothers and sisters that comes from the heart. So this last part is basically saying don't just do things for the sake of doing them. Take care that you do it with love. More simple things like, Lord, I've been doing this all my life, but today I don't feel like it. Why do I need to do it? Why do I need to pray today? Why do I need to show charity to this person? Why do I have to forgive? Simple questions like that. Regain the motivation in your heart so that whatever the Lord asks you to do, you can do it with love. And the last two. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Oh, wow, I really love this one. How wonderful that God will call you. You know what? You are my son. You are my daughter. How? And the proof is you are a peacemaker. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. This tops it up, tops it all, no, for me. Let us pursue for what makes for peace. No, in the letter to the Romans. Make that your aim every day. Okay, we're talking about humility, right? About mercy, about being poor in spirit. And I was saying that the goal probably for Pope Francis is mercy. To love, to share, to give, and to forgive in the process. But meanwhile, what is the atmosphere that we need to keep in our hearts? Meanwhile, we show love and mercy. Seek peace. Peace in your heart, peace in your relationships. And Francis says here, it is not easy to make evangelical peace, which excludes no one, but embraces even those who are a bit odd, strange words, no? Troublesome, difficult, demanding, different, or maybe you're saying, Father Mike, are you talking about me? Beaten down by life or simply uninterested? Well, this one maybe not so much. So, I mean, all of us find someone like that, no, in our lives. Maybe because of our own inner disposition. No, when we are irritated, when we are tired or frustrated, we easily find others like that. It is hard work. It calls for great openness of mind and heart, open to the other person. Since it is not about creating a consensus on paper or a transient, a passing peace for a contented minority. Many times our peacemaking is like that, right? As long as we're good amongst our friends, no? Or a project by a few for the few, you know? So you can sense what Pope Francis is saying. True peace is for everyone. It has to include everyone. And that's why it's hard work. It's very easy to be at peace with your friends, but to be at peace with everyone, it requires constant work, constant outreach. He continues, he says, nor can it attempt to ignore or disregard conflict because it's basically about facing the conflict and resolving it. Instead, it must face conflict head on, resolve it, and make it a link in the chain of a new process. Sometimes conflicts help us to find a way forward. That's what he's saying. We need to be artisans of peace. For building peace is a craft that demands serenity, creativity, sensitivity, and skill. Oof. I think it shows a lot also what he's trying to do, he himself, no, by this number. Are we called to make peace? No, not just to feel peaceful, but to make peace in our communities, in our families, in the social networks that we have. Maybe that is also a calling for us. And lastly, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the persecuted for the sake of righteousness, not because they did wrong. Very easy, the words of Pope Francis. Persecutions are not a reality of the past. For today, too, we experience them. Maybe in Philippines it's a bit less, but Christians are still being killed for their faith all over the world. So it's not something of the past. In fact, Pope John Paul II was saying, the 20th century we've had more martyrs than the whole of church, the history of the church. So it's something that is not of the past, but even today. But how can we apply it to ourselves in the daily martyrdom? He said, in living the gospel, we cannot expect that everything will be easy, for the thirst for power and worldly interest often stands in our way. So expect it, no? There will be resistance if you want to be Christian, if you want to preach the gospel. Whatever weariness and pain we may experience in living the commandment of love and following the way of justice, the cross remains the source of our growth and sanctification. Go back and look at our model, Jesus on the cross. Whenever you feel that, Lord, why is this happening to me? Lord, I'm just doing what you want. This is not fair. Go back and present those questions to Jesus, who is crucified, and to see where he's calling us to. Here we are speaking about inevitable persecution. Oh my goodness. Not the kind of persecution we might bring upon ourselves by our mistreatment of others. Sometimes, it's so unfair, Lord, I know. You said we will suffer when we follow you, and then we forgot what we did to the others. It's not that kind of persecution, according to Pope Francis, but the kind that happens because it challenges the values of the world, even in ourselves. So sometimes we may be afraid. I remember preaching a homily once when there were some tricky issues in the church and in the government. And suddenly after the homily, I don't know why, I just looked around in the congregation thinking, who's there? Who's there? Who's watching? Who's listening? Fear, because when you say something that is just, somebody may not like it. So, okay, so we're done with that. The Beatitudes. So once again, I invite you, we have a time of prayer now. And choose, all right? I don't think we can tackle all the Beatitudes this morning, but just choose the one that you feel most called to. But tricky thing, the one you feel most called to, not because it attracts you only, but also the one that disturbs you. the most? All right. So these are some questions that we can have to talk to Jesus about. Once again, look at him looking at you, wanting to express the way of humility and holiness. Let us ask ourselves, why is humility important for Christian life? And what does it mean for me in a practical way? Okay, what does it mean for me in the practice? What does it mean to be humble? Second, read the Beatitudes of Matthew 5, 3 to 12 slowly once again. Which of them attracts me most? And which one is least attractive? Let's pray about why, okay? Ponder on both. The one that attracts you the most and even moves you so much, but also the one that you say, I don't know about this one. Or, yucky. Why don't you pray about why you have those feelings of attraction or even disgust? Number three, like a kind of conclusion, which of the Beatitudes do I feel called to live more clearly this year? So I say more clearly because maybe we're living all of them, but perhaps there could be one or two that I could live it with more clarity, with more purpose and intention. I want to live this and grow in this Beatitude this year. All right, so we can have our moment of silence and we can ponder these questions.